Hello and welcome. This is Gabby, and I'm coming to you today with a short video on the color wheel. Now you'll see that I have the color wheel in front of me here, and it is by the Color Wheel Company, printed in the USA. Now this particular color wheel has been around for years and years and years. I've only just replaced mine because my other one was getting a bit scrappy, but it's exactly the same one that it was when I bought the other one years ago. And you can also get a smaller version of this, which is very good if you're going away on, crafting retreats and things like that, because it is handy to have a color wheel around to help you choose colors for your card making. Colors that you may not necessarily have chosen if you didn't have a color wheel to see what they would look like. Now, I do have a blog post article on the color wheel called Basic Color Theory and how that helps your card making choices. And that's on my website, gabbyscardcreations.com.au. So if you want to go and check that out, please do so, because it's got a lot of information, a lot of definitions, about how colors work together, etc. But this is just a brief intro to what the color wheel looks like and how it works. Now, there is a lot of information on here, and it tells you how to use the color wheel. It's got color definitions. It doesn't matter if you can't see them very well here on the video, because I've summarized the essential parts on the blog post. But basically it says how to use the color wheel. Select the color on the outside wheel, that is this wheel. And then it says align it with a color on the inside wheel, which is that one. This one here, and the mixture appears in the window, which is this one. So what it's saying here is if I started with a red orange and I added blue, I would get this sort of violet color, which is great. If I go to this one and I had red as my color, my main color, and I added yellow, then I would get an orange. If I move over here and have red and then add blue, I would get another violety shade. So red and blue are primary colors, and they will actually give you a purple. And if I have, as I said, yellow again, yellow is also primary shade. So red and yellow will give me orange. Okay, but if I turn around here and I'm turning the wheel, if I go to blue and add yellow to blue, you get green. So red and yellow and blue are what we call your primary colors, because you cannot make those colors by mixing anything else. Okay, so if you are starting out, for example, with watercolor painting, as long as you have a red, a yellow, and a blue paint in your palette, you can mix a whole load of other colors. And if you get yourself a color wheel, you'll see how that actually works. Okay, now other things on here as well, on the actual wheel, it shows you here from this red violet to the right here, it shows you the warm colors, and from the violet, the cool colors. Now the warm colors have more red in them, and the cooler colors have more blue in them. So for example, if we look at the color red and we just compare it to, things in our lives. So for example, if you look at a tomato, and you call it a tomato red, that's more of, that's got more sort of yellow in it. the red's got more sort of a yellow tone, a warmer tone. Whereas if you look at a cherry red is more of a cool tone because it's got more blue in it. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about warm colors and cool colors. So with the primary colors, you can actually get a warm red, blue, and yellow, and you can get a cool red, blue, and yellow. So if you're starting out painting and you can get those 6 colors, a primary red, blue, and yellow in warm shades and also in cool shades, that will give you even more options for more colors to make on your own. Now, you'll also see here that if we have a color and we add white to it, that gives us, in this case, a pink. So if we've got a red, we add white, you'll get a pink. And it depends on whether you're using a warm red or a cool red as to what type of pink you get. One will be more of a sort of a corally pink and the other will be more of a blue pink. So when you add white to a color, that's actually referred to as a tint. Okay, a color can also be referred to as a hue. So if somebody is saying to you, oh, what hue is it? It's talking about the color. But if you add white to a color, then that becomes a tint. If you add gray to a color, that becomes a tone. If you add black to a color, that becomes a shade. And we'll look at examples of that when I turn this color wheel over. You'll also notice here we have our grayscale. So value 1 is 100% black, going all the way to value 10, which is 100% white, and then everything else in between is grey. So the value is the lightness or the darkness of a color. So these are the greys, but you can actually also get values in a color. So for example, if I decide I'm using a blue violet, by adding more and more white to it, or by adding, by adding more and more white to it, you get a lighter value of that particular color. Okay, so lots of information on this particular color wheel, but on this side of the wheel, essentially you choose the color on the outside wheel, and if you want to mix with another color and you want to see what it's going to look like before you actually mix it. So for example, if you have a red violet and you think, oh, I'm going to mix it with yellow to see what I'll get, you get this sort of poopy sort of looking khaki color. And sometimes you need a color like that, but it also allows you to decide whether you're actually going to use those 2 colors in close proximity in your work. So for example, if you're doing some watercolor work and you're doing wet on wet, meaning you're putting wet paint onto wet paper, and you put red violet there, let's say you want to do some red violet flowers and you also want to do some yellow flowers, you've got to be careful how you place those 2 colors together, because if you place the yellow too close to the red violet and the paper is wet, those colors will blend and you're going to get this poopy color, which you obviously don't want if you're doing flowers. Okay, so having a little bit of knowledge of how colors mix gives you a lot of information to work with when you're actually making your cards. Okay, let's switch over here. Now, this is where you get to see what your different tints and tones, etc. are. So, on this particular side, you basically will choose a color, and it gives you an illustration of the color or relationships or the harmonies. So, for example, if you choose the color red, the primary color red, If you add white to it, you get a pink color, and that is a tint. If you add grey to it, if you add grey, the color grey to this red, you get this dark neutral, that is a tone. And if you add black to red, you get this particular browny reddish shade, and that is a shade. Okay, a tint, a tone, and a shade. Now, you don't have to worry about the names per se, but it is good to know what the color mixing is going to give you. Now, colors that are completely opposite on the color wheel are complementary colors. So here, this arrow actually shows you that the complementary color to red is green. And again, adding, is green. Okay, so the complementary color to red is green. And then again, adding a white, if you're using this particular green, adding a white will give you that green, adding a grey gives you that, adding a black gives you that. So you get your different values, okay, which we were talking about before. So complementary colours are really nice to use if you want a contrast. That's why Christmas cards look wonderful in red and green. All right, and that screams Christmas, red and green. But they are complementary colours on the colour wheel. So because red is green's complement and vice versa, they are going to go together. Now, one combination I tend to use a lot. So again, here, if you're wanting to know what the complements are, you need to choose the key colour and move that around to the colour you want. So if, let's say, I go to orange, just a straight out orange here, the complementary colour to orange is going to be blue. Now, I actually do a lot of my cards, if I want really good contrast, in orange and blue. I just love that combination. It's just so striking, especially if you're using bright colours. But you can use colours that are not so bright. So if we're talking about a bright colour, let's say this particular orange here, we might say that that's bright, and that's more of a saturated colour. But we can look at, let's say, yellow orange, or even go in the orange and add some white to it, and you get this tint that is more desaturated. It's a sort of it's not so bright and bold. It's a quieter sort of color, if that makes sense to you. Okay, so the complement to orange here is blue. Now, we also have split complementaries, so you can use those as well. So I might use orange, and then look at its complementary, but instead of using that blue, I might decide to use a blue violet and a blue green. And those three shades, again, or those three hues, will again work together. So you've got complementary color, which is the direct opposite, and you've got the split complementaries that are on either side of the complementary color. Now, you've also got more information in there. Monochromatic, as I said, is using any tint, tone, or shade of just one color. So if I go back to this, let's say I go to the blue-green here, and I wanted to make a monochromatic card, these particular colors would work well together. We've got the main color, we've got the tint, we've got the tone, and we've got the shade. So that's a monochromatic color. So monochromatic is basically just using the same color but with different mixes. So here, if I did a yellow monochromatic card, you'd get something like that. Okay, so that's that. Now, we also have what we call analogous colors, and that is where you are using colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So for example, if I used red, orange, and orange, and maybe even yellow, orange, or no, red, orange, and a card, that would all go together because those colors are close to each other on the color wheel. If I used orange, orange, and yellow, that would work. If I used red, orange, and yellow, with splitting those two in between, that would still work. So colors that go together or that are close to each other on the color wheel, they are analogous colors. The same with the cooler shades. So if I used a green, a blue-green, and a blue, that would all work in a card. But so would a violet and a blue and maybe a blue-green rather than that green. That green would work too, but you know, it's giving you options there. So these are some of the ways that you can use your color wheel to decide what color options you want to use on a card. Now, I've given you a little example here. This is a card that I made using some Gina K products. And if you just have a look at that card, I'll just go and get the product. Okay, so this is the actual product. It's Majestic Moments, a stamp and die set by Gina K Designs. It's absolutely gorgeous and it allows you to make different scenes. So this is what I used, that stamp set and die set to make this particular scene. Now, this is where you can see I've used complementary colors, which are in this case the blue and the orange, and how I mentioned that I tend to use that quite a lot. Now, I've used different shades of the orange here, and you've got slightly different shades of the blue and blue down here as well. But then I've used the darkest blue at the top, and then I've actually used a yellow, an orange card base. So that really brings it out. Now, other than that, there's just black and different values of grey in here, which I've actually used alcohol marker for the hillside, and for the rest of the background I've used different dye inks, which I've just ink blended. But you can see that that is quite striking. The fact that I've used complementary colours, it's quite a contrast, but it works. So that's just an example of how I use the colour wheel to help me decide on my card making choices. And the more you use a colour wheel, the more you know what goes together, what doesn't, what's analogous, what's a complementary colour, you know, how you can make something lighter, how you can get a brown tone. Because as I said before, your primary colours are red, blue, and yellow. If you mix all of those together, you will get a neutral tone. And whether you get a brown or whether you get a grey neutral will be determined by how much of each of the colours each of those three primary colours you put in. So what I suggest you do, if you don't have a colour wheel already, is go and get one. You should be able to get one from any good local art store. That's where I got mine. But also try playing around with blending colours. So if you are using alcohol markers, you can try blending colours that you wouldn't normally blend to see if you can get neutrals, etc. So, you know, I've got a set of Olo markers. Well, I haven't got a full set. I've got a certain number of Olo markers, alcohol markers, and I don't have any neutrals in there at all. So if I want a neutral, I have to actually mix colors together. I actually have to blend them on the actual cardstock to get a neutral. And that can be quite challenging, but it also can be quite fun. If you're working with watercolors, start doing some swatches and start blending some colors. As I said, you might have lots of watercolors, but try just putting down on a palette a cool red, yellow and blue and a warm red, yellow and blue, and try mixing to see how many different colors you can make. You can also do the blending to you can with colored pencils, and then use something like Gamsol to blend, or just blend using the pencils, just starting coloring with a very light touch with the first color and then go over with the next colors, etc. So whatever coloring medium you use, see if you can do some blending. Also with your inks, if you're ink blending, you'll see what blends together and makes a nice blend. I'm sure you already do that. So many people make sort of rainbow backgrounds for cards. So what do? Do you put down a green? Generally not. Usually you'll put a blue down and then you'll put a yellow down and you'll overlap the two, and that gives you your green. So you're probably already doing a lot of it now, but a color wheel is a good little tool to have in your craft room or your art studio. Anyway, have fun. Until next time, take care.